Have you ever noticed the quiet moment before the day begins, before the alarms, the messages, the names, the worries? That sacred pause between sleep and waking. It's not empty, it's powerful, and it's yours. Because before coffee, you're already creating. In fact, by the time you've reached your kitchen, much of your day has already been shaped, not by what's happened, but by what you assumed would happen. Neville Goddard said, "To be conscious of being is to be alive. To be conscious of being something is to be that which you are conscious of being." That means the very first thing you feel, the very first identity you assume when you rise, that's what the world will reflect back to you. Now here's the catch. Most of us don't realize what that first feeling is. We wake up and unconsciously rehearse the same old inner dialogue. Ugh, another day. I hope nothing goes wrong. Why do I still feel stuck? Without even saying these words out loud, you've already whispered them inside. You've already cast the spell. And so, you relive yesterday. The truth is, manifestation doesn't start when you visualize at lunch or script at night. It begins right here in that hazy, slippery moment before you even sit up in bed. Neville referred to this moment as the threshold state, that in-between zone where your conscious mind hasn't fully taken over, and your subconscious is still wide open. That's your window. That's the moment to plant the seed. Because in those first seconds, when you're not fully awake and not fully asleep, your imagination is fertile, obedient, and listening. So here's what I want you to do. Tomorrow morning, before you move, before you reach for your phone, before a single word returns to you, just lie still and choose one sentence, one identity, one assumption, something simple. It could be, I am safe and supported. Everything is unfolding in my favor. I'm the version of me who gets what I want. Don't just think it, feel it. Sink into it like you're sliding into warm water. Let it become the first felt reality of your day. Because once it's felt, your subconscious takes it as fact and begins to reorganize your world to match. So I'll ask you this. If you knew that your first inner sentence could design your next opportunity, what would you choose to feel when you wake up tomorrow? Let's move now into what happens next. Not just what you say inwardly, but how you say it. Because sometimes, the most powerful inner speech doesn't sound like speech at all. Not all inner speech sounds like words. Some of the most powerful conversations you'll ever have with yourself happen in complete silence. They show up as moods, tones, atmospheres you wake up into. No voice, no sentence, just a feeling. Have you ever opened your eyes and just felt heavy? No words yet, no memory of what day it is, just that familiar weight, that internal weather pattern that says, today's going to be like yesterday. That, too, is inner speech, silent, but just as commanding. Neville once said, "The feeling which comes in response to the question, 'How would I feel if my wish were realized?' is the feeling which should monopolize and dominate your consciousness." But most people's mornings are dominated not by that kind of feeling, but by the quiet residue of worry, disappointment, or effort. And because it doesn't arrive as words, we miss it. We don't recognize it as an assumption, but it is. And assumptions, as Neville taught, harden into fact. So how do you change this? You begin to notice the emotional script that starts to run before thought. You become sensitive to the invisible temperature of your waking state. Do you feel expectant or hesitant? Are you waking up into a problem or into a promise? Tomorrow morning, pause and observe. What's the tone of your being before your mind begins labeling anything? Is there tension in your chest? Is there a subtle dread in your stomach? Or a quiet joy rising beneath the silence? That's your inner self speaking. Even without words, it's giving commands. And here's the shift. You can change the tone first. Before you try to change the thought, change the feeling it rides in on. Breathe into it. Drop in a feeling of confidence, of ease, of celebration. No need to recite anything yet. Just generate the emotional environment of the version of you who already received the good news. Because that version doesn't wake up anxious. That version doesn't feel behind. They rise into peace, into clarity, into inner certainty. So the next time you wake into a heavy silence, ask yourself, is this the feeling of the wish fulfilled, or the weight of the past returning? If it's the past, rewrite it. If it's the wish, stay with it. Let that silent speech do the work for you. Let's take this even further, into your reflection. Because the mirror doesn't just reflect your face, it echoes your self-concept. Let's step into that moment now. The mirror dialogue ritual. There's a moment every morning when you come face to face with yourself. You step into the bathroom, glance into the mirror, and without saying a word, you speak volumes. That first look, that first feeling about the reflection, is a declaration. It might be quiet, it might be automatic, but it's there, and it's often shaped by yesterday's assumptions. Neville said, "To be transformed, the whole basis of your thoughts must change. But your thoughts cannot change unless you have new ideas, for you think from your ideas." The mirror is one of the best places to begin that shift, not by changing what you see, but by changing what you assume about what you see. So here's the invitation. Turn your reflection into a moment of inner authorship. Instead of looking and scanning for flaws, failures, or fatigue, script a new self-concept, internally, silently, but with feeling. Create a 20-second mirror dialogue that speaks from the state you want to embody, not the state you're trying to escape. It could be as simple as, "This is who I am now. I am not becoming her. I am her. I am already chosen, already successful, already aligned. I am the version of me who makes it look effortless." You don't have to say it out loud. You don't even have to smile, but you do have to mean it, because when the inner speech is authentic, the reflection changes, not just in how it looks, but in how it feels. And feeling is the secret. That feeling impressed upon your subconscious begins to attract a life in harmony with it. So next time you meet yourself in the mirror, pause. Don't just see yourself. Speak to yourself as if your wish were already fulfilled. Because when you claim that identity now, the world begins to reflect that version of you. Let's go one step earlier, before the mirror, before the movement, and rewrite the very memories your mind tries to replay each morning. Because your past doesn't need to run today, not if you revise it. Rewrite morning memories to shift the day. Before your feet even touch the ground, your mind starts to assemble a story. And often, it doesn't begin with the blank page of today, but with a rerun of yesterday, the unfinished conversation, the mistake you think you made, the subtle dread of facing the same old thing again. It all returns before the day even begins. But as Neville taught, you are not bound by what was. You are bound only by what you accept and assume now. He said, "Change the past by reimagining it." The past and the future are all part of this imagination. You don't revise history because it's convenient. You revise it because your memory of the past is shaping your future. So when you wake up and your mind tries to revisit that uncomfortable moment from yesterday, stop. Rehearse it differently. If someone dismissed you, imagine them praising you instead. If you hesitated, see yourself acting boldly. If you failed, replay the scene with a successful outcome. You're not lying to yourself. You're releasing yourself from a version of the story that no longer serves you. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between what really happened and what's felt vividly enough to be real. It simply accepts the new impression, and from there, reality begins to reorganize itself around your new assumption. So tomorrow morning, before the echo of yesterday hardens into today, ask yourself, what memory can I rewrite in this moment to open a new door? Not later, not tonight, right now, before the day begins, before the old story plays again. Rewrite it and begin again. Now we'll explore something even more subtle, the everyday spells we cast on ourselves without realizing it. Because your inner speech isn't just descriptive, it's directive, especially when you whisper, "I don't feel like it." There's a phrase that slips into the morning almost unnoticed, a quiet, casual thought that feels like an observation, but acts like a command. "I don't feel like it." It sounds harmless, honest even, but in truth, it's not just a reaction, it's an inner decree. A spell spoken inwardly that begins to shape the atmosphere of your entire day. Neville said, "Your world is your consciousness objectified," which means the moment you claim, "I don't feel like it," your reality starts to mirror that state. Opportunities shrink, energy dulls, everything seems a little harder, not because the world changed, but because you declared that you couldn't. The universe responds, not to what you want, but to what you are being. And "I don't feel like it" is a state of being, a state of resistance, of separation from your desired self. Now this doesn't mean you have to force yourself into hyperproductivity. That's not the point. This is about catching the spell before it turns into a story. Because once it becomes a story, I never have energy. Nothing excites me. It's always like this. It becomes an identity, and that identity writes your script for the day. So the next time you hear that phrase in your mind, try something different. Pause and ask, what would I feel like if I already had what I want? Not what do I feel like doing, But what do I feel like being? From there, a new current begins to stir, subtle, but real. It might sound like, I may not feel ready, but I'm already aligned. I don't need to force this. I just need to return to the version of me who flows. Feeling isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's quiet certainty, but that's enough. That's powerful, because once you shift that inner tone, the outer world follows. Before we move, what if the first thing you read in the morning had the power to undo the assumptions that have been running your life on autopilot? Neville believed that a single thought, truly accepted, could reorder your world. There's something in the pinned comment that gives you 400 chances to do just that, one sentence at a time. If you're serious about rewriting your inner script, don't skip it. Let's keep going. There's something subtle that happens in the first few minutes of waking. Before we've spoken to anyone, before we've made a decision, we've already begun a conversation within ourselves. But the form that conversation takes, whether it's a demand, a complaint, or a quiet curiosity, makes all the difference. Most people wake up in a rush, in resistance, or in reaction, and without realizing it, they begin their day not with intention, but with interrogation. The wrong kind of interrogation. Why am I so tired again? Why does this always happen to me? What if I mess this up? Will today be just like yesterday? These questions don't seem dramatic because they sound familiar. They're common. But what's common isn't always harmless. Neville said, feeling is the secret, not the words of the question or the affirmation, but the feeling behind it. Every question contains within it a hidden assumption, and it's that assumption your subconscious responds to. When you ask, why does nothing ever work out for me? You're not seeking an answer. You're announcing a belief. You're planting a seed and asking your inner world to water it. Your subconscious doesn't argue. It doesn't evaluate whether the question is useful. It just takes the emotional charge behind the question and begins to mirror it. And that is where so many people unknowingly continue to manifest the very things they want to avoid, because they are unconsciously asking for them, with attention, with emotion, with repetition. But let's turn this around. Imagine waking up and asking something different, something that assumes possibility, not limitation. Instead of, why do I feel so behind? You ask, how would I feel if I were already in alignment today? Instead of, will this ever change? You ask, what if today holds something I didn't expect? In the best way. This may seem small, even naive, but the point isn't to convince your intellect. The point is to steer your feeling, because feeling is where reality begins. Neville spoke often of assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not trying to force it into being, but accepting it, allowing it, as if it were already true. And a question, an inner question rooted in assumption, does exactly that. Think about how your body reacts to different questions. When you ask yourself, what if I can't do this? Notice the contraction, the tightening in your chest or jaw. But when you ask, what if this is already working in ways I can't see yet? Notice the shift. Your breath deepens. Your chest opens. You soften into the possibility. And that feeling shift? That's the manifestation. That's the doorway to a new state. Let's take this even deeper. You're not asking questions to get answers. You're asking them to create a mood, to align your inner tone with the outcome you want, before any evidence exists. Neville once said, dare to believe in the reality of your assumption and watch the world play its part relative to its fulfillment. So ask questions that dare. Ask questions that imply your assumption is already real. Here are a few powerful examples you can try tomorrow morning. What would it feel like if I had already received that call I'm waiting for? How would I move through this day if I truly trusted things were working out? If today were designed just for my success, how would I behave? What if everything is already rearranging in my favor? These are not affirmations in disguise. They are keys. They unlock the imagination, bypass resistance, and gently suggest a new version of self. And the more emotional weight you place behind the question, the more it resonates, the more easily it takes root. You don't need to answer the question. Your conscious mind may try. It may want to rationalize, doubt, or debate. Let it. That's not the part we're speaking to. Your subconscious is listening for emotional truth. And the moment it registers that shift in state, from fear to calm, from doubt to curiosity, it accepts it as done. Let's be clear. This is not about tricking yourself or ignoring reality. This is about choosing which part of reality you respond to. Do you wake up in dialogue with limitation, or in quiet communication with possibility? Because inner questions aren't just words. They're signals. signals that set the tone for your thoughts, your actions, your outcomes. So tomorrow morning, as the day begins and your first thoughts rise, ask something different, something that suggests the future is already yours, something that assumes that the version of you you're becoming already exists. You may be surprised by what shifts, not because you forced it, but because you invited it. And now that you've set that tone, it's time to make it stick. Let's give that feeling a form. One phrase, one quiet anchor, an inner statement you can return to again and again, through coffee, through movement, through noise, to keep you aligned with the state you've chosen. But how to create a morning assumption anchor? There's something powerful about the quiet repetition of a single idea, especially when that idea is wrapped in identity, not as something you're trying to become, but something you already are. Neville said, "You rise from the dream of being the man you are, to the awakening as that which you desire to be." That shift doesn't happen in one leap. It happens in subtle alignment, moment by moment. And in the morning, alignment is everything. Because once you've asked the right question, once you've touched the feeling of your desired state, you need a way to keep returning to it. Not with force, but with familiarity. This is where the assumption anchor comes in. An assumption anchor is a short, simple phrase you repeat quietly to yourself as you move through your morning routine. You don't chant it like a mantra. You wear it like an identity. It's not a hope. It's not a wish. It's a statement of being, a reminder from the version of you who already lives the life you're stepping into. It can be as simple as, "I am the one who always lands on their feet. Everything is always rearranging in my favor. Things are happening for me now, not later. I am already her. I am already him." This isn't about affirming something over and over to convince yourself. It's about settling into a phrase that feels true enough to soften resistance, a sentence that feels like a home inside you. You might repeat it while brushing your teeth, while tying your shoes, while watching the water boil. And here's the nuance. You don't need to believe it with your intellect. You just need to allow yourself to feel what it would be like if it were already true. Because the subconscious doesn't respond to effort. It responds to ease, to familiarity, to repetition soaked in feeling. And the more often you return to your assumption anchor, the more quickly it becomes the default tone of your inner speech. So instead of waking up and unconsciously reaching for the same doubts, fears, and old identities, you reach for your anchor. You place your awareness there. You remind your body, your emotions, your nervous system, "This is who I am now." Neville didn't teach us to become something new. He taught us to assume the state and let reality catch up. That assumption is your foundation, and your anchor is what keeps it stable, even when the world appears otherwise. So tomorrow, as you walk from the bed to the sink, from the sink to the street, ask yourself, what phrase would the version of me who already has it all, already is it all, already lives it all, whisper to themselves as they begin their day? Start there, and return to it often. Let's see what happens when the mind tries to pull you back, not with doubt, but with repetition. Old conversations, old arguments, old versions of you that no longer fit, and how to break that loop before it begins again. Break the loop of old conversations. How many times have you woken up only to find yourself already in a conversation that ended hours ago? Not out loud, not with the person, but in your mind. You replay what you wish you'd said. You rehearse what you fear they might say. You relive the discomfort, the judgment, the misunderstanding again. And with every internal replay, you energize that version of yourself. The version still needing to prove, still needing to defend, still feeling small. Neville said, "Your reactions to life tell where you live in consciousness. What you are inwardly saying and doing is far more important than what you outwardly show. Your inner speech, especially the imagined conversations you continue to have long after the moment has passed, anchors you in a specific state. And if those conversations are coming from fear, insecurity, or self-doubt, then you're rehearsing those states into being. The morning is when these loops are most likely to begin. The mind is still soft, still reaching for shape. And instead of choosing a new dialogue, we often default to the unfinished ones. But here's the truth Neville pointed us toward. You are not obligated to keep speaking to a memory. You can replace that loop with a new one. If your mind wants to go there, if it insists on replaying a conversation, then rewrite it, literally. Use that same scene but change the dialogue. If someone dismissed you, imagine them seeing your worth. If you were left out, imagine them welcoming you in. If you were accused, imagine them apologizing for misunderstanding you. You're not doing this to manipulate reality. You're doing it to reclaim your state of being, because your inner conversations are not commentary, they're commands. When you speak to someone inwardly, you're not just engaging with a memory, you're defining who you are in relation to them. And that definition becomes the identity you carry into your day. Neville taught that your world is your conversation pushed out. That doesn't just apply to spoken words. It applies to the dialogues you carry with you silently, repeatedly, unquestioningly. So tomorrow morning, if your mind pulls you back into an old conversation, don't resist it. Just change it. Replace criticism with praise. Replace tension with understanding. Replace doubt with confirmation. Feel the shift. Feel the relief. Because when you script new inner dialogues, you don't just change how you feel, you change the state you live from. And from that state, your world responds in kind. Now we'll explore a layer even more subtle. What happens not just in what you say, but in how you say it. The tone of your inner voice, the emotional frequency behind your thoughts, and how it may be shaping your reality more than the words themselves. Your inner speech isn't just about what you say, it's about how you say it. The tone of your inner voice is often more powerful than the words themselves. Neville said, "Speech is the image of mind." But he wasn't talking about external speech. He meant the silent, emotional language spoken from within, the tone that carries your assumptions into form. You can whisper, "It's working for me," and still project resistance. Or you can say it in a quiet, settled tone that feels like truth. And suddenly, the same sentence takes root. This is because your subconscious responds not to the surface of your words, but to the emotional frequency behind them. Tone is what reveals what you truly believe. You might affirm success, but if your tone is anxious, rushed, or sarcastic, the message received is one of lack. On the other hand, a single calm, confident phrase, spoken with conviction, can shift your entire state. Tone is the texture of belief. So listen closely. How do you speak to yourself in the first hour of the day? Is your inner tone hurried, doubtful, flat, or does it sound like someone who already has what they want? You don't need louder thoughts. You need cleaner tone. Try softening your inner voice. Add warmth, add clarity. Let it match the identity you've chosen, not the one you're trying to escape. Neville taught that your world is your consciousness objectified, and that consciousness includes the soundless vibration of your inner mood. Adjust that tone, and the message to your subconscious becomes clear. From there, your reality responds. Now, we'll use this tone to generate something magnetic, a sense of inner celebration, joy without proof, the applause before the performance. What if you started your day with celebration even before anything had happened? Not as fantasy, not as a trick, but as a conscious decision to dwell in the feeling that the wish has already been fulfilled. Neville wrote, "The moment you accept the wish as an accomplished fact, the subconscious finds means for its realization. That acceptance can take many forms, but one of the simplest and most effective is this: imaginary applause. Imagine waking and before you even move, you hear the quiet sound of joy. Applause. Congratulations. A voice saying, "You did it." Feel the warmth of completion, not future hope, but past tense certainty. This isn't about pretending something has happened. It's about allowing yourself to feel as though it already has, and letting that feeling shape your state. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between what's physically real and what's vividly imagined. It responds to the emotional reality of the scene. By imagining applause, celebration, approval, you're stepping into the afterglow of success. And from that state, your actions, responses, and even the events of the day begin to align with the outcome you've assumed. Try this. Close your eyes for a moment and hear the sound of people cheering. Imagine someone saying, "I knew you would do it." Picture the text message, the smile, the confirmation arriving. Let that scene play, not as a hope but as memory. It may feel strange at first, but done sincerely, it creates a resonance, a signal of completion. Neville taught that the key is always to feel from the end, and nothing signals the end like the joy that follows achievement. So ask yourself each morning, what would it feel like to already be celebrated? What applause would I hear if my desire had just unfolded? Hear it now. Feel it now. Let it become the tone you carry into the day, because the world will always echo your inner state. Begin with celebration, and life will meet you with more to celebrate. Let's return to the very beginning, the moment before movement, before engagement, where stillness becomes power. The place where Neville's most direct instruction applies. Do not rise until the feeling has you. Don't get out of bed until you've assumed. Neville once said, "Do not rise until the feeling of the wish fulfilled has you." It's one of his most overlooked instructions, and one of his most direct. Yet how often do we do the opposite? We wake up and immediately move into the motions of the day. The body moves before the mind has settled. The outer momentum begins before the inner state has been chosen. But this first moment, before you lift your head, before you speak, before you act, is the most fertile ground of all. It's the place where identity can shift effortlessly, if only you allow yourself to remain still long enough to feel it. Neville taught that consciousness is the only reality. So if you rise from your bed in the state of being rushed, doubtful, or indifferent, you step into a world that reflects exactly that. But if you remain in bed just a little longer, not asleep, not fully awake, but in that soft in-between, something else becomes possible. You begin to feel from the version of yourself who has already received. You lie still and allow the state to rise within you, not a fantasy, not a wish, but a felt sense of alreadiness. You might imagine your phone lighting up with the message you've been waiting for. You might hear someone speaking to you with admiration, or you may simply feel a calm, steady knowing. It is done. The key isn't the detail, it's the feeling. Once that feeling arrives, not as a visitor but as your identity, you get up. Not before, because now your movement is informed by assumption. You walk as the one who knows. You enter your day not in search of confirmation, but in expression of what is already true within. This practice is simple but transformative. Stay still, close the gap, assume the state, let it have you, fully, then rise. From there, your outer world begins to follow the inner lead. In the final chapter, we return to the most essential foundation of all, not your desires, not your circumstances, but the pure awareness behind it all, the I am, and how meeting it each morning can change everything. Before memory returns, before thoughts form, there is only presence. That first moment of waking, silent, formless, is pure I am, not I am this or I am that, just being. Neville taught that this is your point of power. From here, you are free to choose who you now wish to be. Don't rush to fill it. Let it hold you. Then gently claim the state you desire. I am calm. I am complete. I am already living it. Begin from I am, and everything you declare after bends to match it. Neville taught that your world begins not when you rise but when you assume, and every assumption begins with inner speech, often silent, often subtle, but always creative. This morning dialogue is not just a habit. It's the foundation of your reality. Each thought, each tone, each question whispered to yourself sets the stage for what unfolds. You've now seen how to use it deliberately, to revise, to redirect, to realign. Not later in the day, but first thing, before action, before thought takes shape. Neville said, "The first word is always the most powerful. It sets the pattern. So let your first word be chosen. Let it be rooted in the identity you want to live from, not the one you're trying to escape. One sentence, one tone, one quiet assumption is enough to shift the atmosphere of your entire day. And if you felt even one of Neville's ideas reach you differently today, check the pinned comment. There's something waiting there that may say exactly what you need to hear, at the moment you need to hear it. Return to the first word. That's where creation begins.